The rope bit into the skin of his palms, the knot a heavy promise in the pre-dawn silence. Beneath his feet, the deck was cold and damp, but the air was thick with the sweat of absolute terror. He wasn't just stealing a ship, he was stealing his life, and the lives of 17 other souls huddled below deck, all held captive by the very breath he now held in his lungs. Failure wouldn't mean jail. It meant the execution of a dream. The year was 1862. The city was Charleston, South Carolina, and the man about to hijack a Confederate warship disguised as its captain was a 23-year-old enslaved wheelman named Robert Smalls. The humid air of Charleston pressed down like a physical weight, thick with the smell of marsh mud, salt, and the ever-present cloying scent of fear. For Robert Smalls, the city was both his prison and his school. Since he was a boy, Robert was drawn to the waterfront. It was a place of perpetual motion, a grand contradiction where the rigid laws of the South seemed to soften against the restless, indifferent ocean. When his master leased him to work at the docks, first at a hotel, then as a lamplighter, and eventually at the docks themselves, Robert discovered his true calling. He was smart, observant, and possessed a preternatural gift for navigation. He memorized every channel, every sandbar, every tide, every patrol route, and every cannon emplacement. By his early 20s, Robert was assigned to the CSS Planter, a 150-foot side-wheel steamer originally built for transporting cotton, but now refitted as an armed dispatch boat for the Confederate Navy. Though his title was merely wheelman, Robert knew the harbor better than any white captain. He memorized the exact patterns of the Confederate mines, the patrol schedules, and the times when the fort's cannons were manned. He watched his captains carefully, especially Captain Charles Relea. He memorized everything: the way Relea wore his cap, the style of his walk, the commands he barked, the subtle movements of his hands on the wheel. This was not mere curiosity. This was the quiet preparation of a daring act of rebellion. Robert was married to Hannah Jones, a former slave who worked as a hotel maid. They had 2 children, Elizabeth and Robert Jr. It was the sight of his children and the constant crushing reality of their bondage that sharpened Robert's resolve. Hannah too pushed him, whispering the desperate hope for freedom too dangerous to voice aloud. "Robert," she had said one night, "I would rather see you dead than see you and our children remain slaves." That grim ultimatum became the spark that ignited the plan. The opportunity came on the night of May 12, 1862. The Union blockade had tightened around Charleston, and the Confederacy was on high alert. The CSS Planter was moored at the North Atlantic Wharf. In a display of arrogance and overconfidence, Captain Relea and 2 other white officers decided to spend the night ashore, leaving the ship in the hands of its enslaved crew, 8 men. They believed the enslaved men had nowhere to run and no courage to attempt anything daring. They were wrong. As soon as the officers' boat disappeared into the darkness, Robert gathered the crew. There was no need to convince them. The misery of their lives had already done that. They moved quietly, raising the Confederate flag, firing up the boilers, and setting the ship in motion. The planter slipped from the wharf, gliding toward a rendezvous point where Robert had hidden his family and others who sought freedom. The first terrifying task was to pick up their families. Hidden in a nearby slip was a second vessel, where Hannah, the children, Robert's brother, and 17 others waited, praying for the signal. A low, distinct whistle called them to the moving planter. They transferred quietly, hiding below decks under canvas and timber, hearts pounding. They were all in now. One small error could mean death. The gauntlet ahead was the harbor's defenses. The planter had to pass directly under the massive guns of Fort Sumter. Robert, wearing Captain Relaya's uniform and straw hat, took the wheel. He mimicked the captain's posture and gestures with uncanny precision. First came Fort Johnson, which they passed without incident. Then came Fort Sumter, looming like a giant shadow in the dim dawn light. A sentry called out, and Robert, with nerves of steel, gave the familiar Confederate signals. The guns remained silent, and the planter passed safely into open water. Once clear, the crew quickly lowered the Confederate flag and raised a white bedsheet, a desperate symbol of surrender and peace. They approached the Union blockade. The nearest ship, USS Onward, prepared to fire, expecting an enemy vessel. But as a sailor looked through the glass, he saw the white flag and the black man at the wheel. The order to fire was held. Robert stepped forward, saluted, and spoke the words that would be immortal. "I have brought you the planter and other valuable property, sir." The valuable property was not just the ship, cannons, and documents, but the 18 lives Robert had delivered from bondage to freedom. It was a victory for the Union, a humiliation for the Confederacy, and the dawn of a new life for Robert Smalls.